get everybody back in the room for those that are here in person, and for those online. We want you to know that we just are coming back from a 30-minute break, so everybody was a little late getting back in for their drinks. Happy to report we do have water today for all of those of you online who were worried about us. It's not the warmest water, is it? We all had quite chilly showers this morning, but at least we had water. Happy to also report that we are now over 600 registrants from almost 100 countries. So congratulations to all of you who are out there online and who unfortunately couldn't make it here in person, but we're really happy that you're able to be here online. We have a really great panel now, and this is one of my favorite panels. I did this panel about 3 or 4 years ago in Miami, and I will tell you that you don't know this, but I have talked about this panel over 100 times because I learned on this panel something that is so relevant to patient advocates. And that is, for many years, I've been a patient advocate for 23 years now, and oftentimes I've wondered, do we really have impact, or are we just doing this to feel good? Because a lot of times we can't measure the impact of what we're having, of what we're doing. Sometimes you can. You could say, well, we had this many this and this many that. But sometimes we just follow our missions knowing our missions will do good, but it's hard to measure the actual impact that we're having. But I learned from the EMA that actually they do that, right? And you're going to hear all about that, that the EMA, my understanding from our old panel was that they are tracking data of policies that have changed once patients got engaged. And I have told advocates that all over the world, and I have shared the slide deck from the EMA at least 100 times with people that are so fascinated by that. So I think it's a good jumpstart into what could happen around the world so that patient engagement with regulators around the world can start happening more often. And we're going to tell you exactly how to do that, what opportunities exist, and I'm really pleased to have 2 major regulators here from the EMA and from the FDA who run those exact programs that engages patients with regulators, but brings the patient voice into the regulatory system. So important, because so often patients feel lost in the system and they don't know how to get involved. You're going to learn that today, of how to get involved, and we're going to talk about how this can be spread around the world. Then you're going to hear from one of our top patient advocates, Zorana, who runs, you know I'm going to say this wrong, who runs Digestive Cancers Europe. So she used to run a colon cancer organization. So for the rest of my life, she's going to be known as running Europa Colon. But Europa Colon is now Digestive Cancers Europe, and they cover all cancers in Europe. And she's going to talk about her experience as a patient advocate in engaging with regulators around the world. So with that, I'm going to turn things over first to Julia, who is with the European Medicines Agency. So Julia, take over, and thank you.
Ooh. So let me just see. Can you hear me? Yes? Good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you very much for having us here. I have to say it's been a great pleasure, and especially because this is one of the first conferences in person I've attended in a really long time, so it really matters. Thank you so much. As Andrew has anticipated, let me go through the speakers. My name is Julia Gabrielli, and I am a patient engagement liaison at the European Medicine Agency. I'm quite new there. I've only been in my role for a couple of months, so this is really the work of many of my colleagues, and I hope to do it justice in presenting it to you today. Since this is quite an international crowd, maybe a few words on what the European Medicine Agency is and who we are, what we do. We're a European executive agency, and our mission is really to protect human and animal health through the sound evaluation of medicines. And I will no longer talk about animal health for the scope of this presentation, but we're also involved in veterinary medicines. And we really believe in the sound evaluation of medicines throughout the life cycle of a medicine. To do so, we facilitate the development and access to medicine by providing guidance to developers early on in the stages of development of a medicine, of new technologies. We evaluate applications for marketing authorization, and we monitor the safety of medicines across their life cycles, so the risks, the side effects, once people are really using the medicines that we have authorized. And throughout this process, we produce a large amount of information, which we digest, translate for all of our different stakeholders, and make reliable information about the medicines that we approve available to their users, so to prescribers and patients. All medicines that have gone through the European Medicine Agency procedures are said to have gone through something called a centralized procedure. This is because this is not the only way that medicines can be approved in Europe, but having a centralized body that allows all medicines to be authorized in all EU countries at the same time, that provides a sort of centralized system for safety monitoring, that produces information not only in English but also in the languages of the Union, is obviously advantageous for the European Union at large. And probably most importantly, it allows all countries in the Union to have access to the same pool of experts, to the same expert resources throughout the continent. Because we serve all European Union citizens, this means that we serve about 500 million people, speaking about 24 official languages in the 27 member states. And this poses us with a real question: how do we engage with these citizens, and how do we make sure that the users of our medicines are represented throughout our regulatory work? And this is where the work with patients really comes in. Engagement with patients has been a key part of the work of the agency since its foundation in 1995. We have achieved several regulatory milestones. We've coded our engagement in our framework of engagement with patients. We've created several regulatory bodies with patients, for example, the Patient and Consumer Working Party. And now the work we do is really aimed at encouraging participation of patients in every aspect of the medicine regulatory journey. And this is how we do it. This is the medicine regulatory journey. It has 3 phases, sort of the pre-submission phase, where developers are really working on preparing their evidence for the authorization of their new medicine, their new technologies, the evaluation phase where we look at that information, and the post-authorization phase where if a medicine is authorized, we get to look at the safety, we make sure that the positive benefit risk of a medicine keeps being positive throughout the use, throughout the time that patients are actually using this medicine. And patients are involved throughout this journey. They're involved as independent experts in the various phases of the evaluation. They're involved as active members of the scientific committees. So the scientific committees are the scientific bodies that actually perform the evaluation. And 4 of our 7 scientific committees actually have patient representatives actively involved in the committee workings. And also they're involved as reviewers of documents. They review all of the communications that are meant to target patients that leave the agency, that are published on our website. So they really are involved throughout the life of a medicine. And all of this involvement is coded in our framework of engagement with patient consumers and their organizations. This document was initially drafted in 2005, and when it first came to be, it was really about interaction. So it was really about the 3rd and 4th bullet point of the slide. So we were trying to enhance the understanding of medicine regulation and their role in patients, and we were working towards targeted communication to patients and consumers about the support that they could provide. Now, we call it a framework of engagement because we're actually working almost bilaterally. we've introduced the support of access to individual patient to real-life experiences. So now we're really trying to capitalize on the experience of patients of living with a condition, of having tried multiple treatment options, and we're trying to feed that information back in the regulatory process in the form of patient experience data. So we've talked a lot about patient interaction, but who does EMA interact with? Who are these patients? Well, essentially, we interact with patients on an organization level and on an individual level. Organizations can interact through the EMA if they are what so-called EMA-eligible organizations, so organizations that fulfill a certain amount of criteria that are established in regulation. And individual experts can interact with us if they've undergone a process of assessment of their interest, declaration of interest, and this assessment really allows both organizations and patients to take part in the nitty-gritty of the evaluations, to really be privy to confidential commercial information and information that really allows them to be at the core of the evaluation of a medicine. Patients can interact with us representing 3 different levels of representation. A first level of representation where patients are representing their community. So they're representing patients at large as a civil society. And these representatives are the people that stand in the scientific committees. As I mentioned, EMA has 7 scientific committees that are responsible for actually undergoing the scientific evaluation of medicines. And patients have representatives in the COMP, which is our orphan medicine committee. And actually, this was the first committee to have a patient representative amongst its members. The PDCO, which is the pediatric committee, the CAT, which is the Committee for Advanced Therapies, and the PRAC, which is our safety assessment committee. And patients are also involved in the EMA's management board, so in the highest governing body of the operations and functions of the EMA, we have 2 patient representatives. And the take-home message from this slide is really the patients don't only have an advisory function. At EMA, they are actually involved in executive decisions. They're involved in decisions about positive benefit-risk assessment. They are involved in decisions about the operations of the agency. They really make part of governing institutions of the agency. And on the second level, patients are involved at EMA when they're representing their organizations. And we do this mostly through our working party, Patients and Consumers Working Party, which often works quite closely with the Healthcare Professional Working Party. This is a working party where representatives from 22 of our eligible organizations are present. They meet regularly. They meet 4 times a year. We interact with them during these meetings. We interact with them through other activities like workshop, information sessions. And here we are really trying to engage with their organization as their representatives of a specific disease or a specific patient group and gather input on some sort of more overarching healthcare concerns. For example, we interact with them about shortages. Quite recently, we had a workshop about patient experience data. This is how we kind of take the temperature of what patient organizations think about individual healthcare issues. And quite recently, we're also trying to involve patient organizations more and more in the regulation, in the evaluation of medicines. We've recently started a pilot where the evaluators of a specific medicine, when they receive a medicine application, can send the application to particular relevant patient organizations who have 3 to 4 weeks to produce a dossier about information that may be of relevance to the evaluation, about living with the condition, about the treatment options that are currently available. This has been a pilot. It's been ongoing for a couple of years now, for 17 months now. And so far it's been only for orphan medicine, so only for medicines for rare diseases. But we have actually recently studied the impact that this pilot has had, and we've actually noticed that in 45% of cases where patient organizations contributed to the evaluation, this contribution actually made it into the initial assessment report of a medicine and was taken in by the medicine evaluators. So we think this is of value, and we've expanded the pilot to now cover other medicines as well, not exclusively medicines for rare diseases. And finally, patients can represent themselves as individual patients, as people with experience living with a certain disease. And they are involved as experts in several activities. They are involved as reviewers of documents. And if you personally, as a patient, would be interested in taking part in one of these procedures for EMA, you can register on our website as a patient expert. We use a database of patients as our as a source to find individual patient experts. This is only for people who are residents in the European Union, but this database is also the database that we use to disseminate information about our activities. So if you're not an EU citizen, if you don't live in the EU, you can still sign up and have access to information that EMA disseminates. And I've already talked a little bit about some of the impact of our CHMP early contact pilot, but we have recently looked into the impact of a few other of our activities. And for example, in the case of review of documents, we've actually studied that 50% of the comments that are made by patients make it in documents that are published and materials that EMA disseminate. And when we're looking at scientific advice, this is the process by which medicine developers can come to EMA before the application of a marketing of an application for marketing authorization to kind of receive guidance on how to structure studies. The aim of this is to make sure that no patient is subjected to a study for a drug, for a clinical trial, for example, for a drug that is not going to pass our evaluation. And companies come to us, developers come to us to ask for this kind of advice, and we often involve patients in this advice. And we've seen actually that 1 in 5 of these opinions that are given to companies are changed because of the comments of a patient. And this may not sound like a lot, but first of all, 1 in 5 medicines, I think, is a lot. And secondly, actually 50% of the comments made by patients led to a discussion of some description. So it may be that in the end the discussion was in agreement with that of the other experts, but in 1 in 5 cases, patients actually changed the outcome of these opinions. And moving on, we know that when it comes to patient engagement, one size doesn't fit all. Meaning that we try to engage as many methodologies as possible to engage with patients. We try to have them face-to-face, participate in meetings. We speak to them on the phone for to gather their input. We gather their input in writing. As I said, they take part in committee meetings. We gather their input through surveys. And now growingly, we are exploring different methodologies to gather patient experience data in our evaluation through real-world evidence. And we also know that patients need support to be able to take part in these, to feel confident to take part in these procedures. And for this, we employ a series of training tools. We try and provide patients with appropriate support by giving them, by organizing training days, by providing info sheets on the different procedures that they can take part in, videos. We have, of course, web pages. We have, of course, the EMA web site, and we also provide one-to-one support. I regularly reach out to patients over the phone, just to make sure that they know that when they take part in these procedures, although they are working alongside experts, alongside doctors, alongside scientists, they have the right to speak because they are the people who actually live with conditions. Finally, it's not an easy, straightforward process, of course. Finding suitable patients can be an issue, either for language barrier problems. Remember, we have 27 member states, which means not everybody is as confident in English as native English speakers. But also, unfortunately, we do need a language of exchange, and most of our committees do work and all of our committees work in English. And also availability, because patients are doing this work on a voluntary basis, and a lot of them are busy working people. Also, we want to make sure that comprehensive and tailored training is available, as I've mentioned. We try to define as much as possible what the role of patients will be in individual procedures, so that expectation can be managed on both angles, on the side of the patient, but also on the side of the experts with whom they are working. And we try to manage potential conflict of interest. This is not always straightforward, for example, in communities of rare diseases where there are not a lot of patient experts available. We really make an effort to see that the patients that we use, whose input we use in regulatory procedures are representative of the population that will be treated by that medicine. And finally, it's not always easy to measure the value and the impact of patients. Sometimes, you know, it's a qualitative assessment that we in some way need to make tangible through numbers, because we're regulators and we understand numbers. However, overall, I think there is no discussion that engaging with patients leads to more meaningful outcomes in terms of medicines, in terms of medicine evaluations and approvals. It leads to better, safer medicines that everyone has access to. And we have learned a lot from patients. We are constantly refining the way we work with patients, but it's been a fulfilling and hopefully ever-growing collaboration. Thank you.
Well, I'm just as excited to hear all of that data again as I was 3 or 4 years ago. So just to repeat, what I heard was that 20% of scientific opinions changed as a result of patients giving input. Scientific advice, scientific opinions, 20%. Now, changing a scientific opinion is not easy, but to change it because a patient gave data is even harder. And I just hands off to, hand claps to the EMA for not only allowing and making it as easy as possible for patients to be engaged and training them, but for tracking that data, because we now know that what we do matters. We change policy, we change scientific opinions, and 50% of the time, patients' comments were incorporated into the papers that you publish. So there you go. What we do matters, right? So, but is it that easy? We're going to hear from a patient advocate next, Zorana, who's going to give us real-world examples of how her organization and she personally engages with regulators. So, Zorana.
Yeah, I have the clicker. So, good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here in person. As Julia said, last week I just said I will no longer do online conferences, and I'm really happy to be here to see your faces, because when you speak and you look at the screen, this is not just the same. So, I'm Zorana Marovic, and I'm the CEO of Digestive Cancers Europe, and I'm really happy to be here to represent our network of 39 member organizations coming from across WHO region Europe. And also during my presentation today, I will just not show what we do or our slides, because patient engagement is a much broader topic. We work with other organizations such as PFMD, such as UPATI, such as some others. So I will show a number of slides that were developed by them. And here is just a little bit about my organization. So as Andy said at the beginning, we go a long way. Some 15 years ago, we used to be Europa Colon, supporting patients with colorectal cancer, and then in 2018, we re-registered under the name Digestive Cancers Europe to support digestive cancers patients, which are the patients that are diagnosed with esophageal, liver, stomach, pancreas, rectum, colon, and rare digestive cancers. And when it comes to numbers, unfortunately, the numbers are not so great for digestive cancers in Europe. We act on behalf of 900,000 patients that are diagnosed with digestive cancers every year. We act on behalf of 1.8 million digestive cancer survivors and on families or relatives of those people that sadly die, which is around 600,000 every year. And below you can see our website address in case you want to have further information. So I started this presentation with various definitions on what is patient engagement. And you can see that it is about involving patients and carers. It is about active and valuable collaboration, but for me personally, the most important word here is meaningful. And meaningful patient engagement is one where patients are collaborators and decision makers at each step, thereby ensuring their needs and priorities are accurately reflected. Because very often we companies or some bodies reach out to us, academia reach out to us to engage with us, but sometimes it's the tick box exercise. And I think that whatever we do with patient organizations, we have to ensure that this is a meaningful collaboration. And you will see that my slides are really much complementary to Julia's slides, and I think this really shows that we are in this journey together and that we have to work closely with regulators and with other bodies in order to really engage patients. So, and this is the slide produced by BFMD, and it shows the progress or when the patient engagement started. And it started some 30 years ago as in patient advocacy. It started with the HIV community, it started with rare diseases community, and the progress has been pretty much linear to, until 2019. Also on this slide, you will see who are the relevant stakeholders like EMA, like FDA, like NICE in Europe, and also some other organizations. And also you can see different guidance documents that are produced on that journey. And here you can see the acceleration in 2020 and 2021, and even further acceleration in 2022. So I really think the time is now to discuss this, and it's really important that patients are engaged. On this slide, this is a slide that all those that are in Europe can see pretty much in all the presentations that speak about patient engagement. And it is from a publication done some 5 years ago by Jan Geisler, Bettina Rill, and others who are very active patient advocates in Europe. And this is the patient engagement roadmap. And it shows how and when the patient engagement starts. So from the very beginning, from defining the research needs, then to protocol synopsis development, to protocol design development, providing practical implications, then all the way to the evaluation process, as Julia briefly described, and then in the post-marketing activities and surveillance. And this is where patients provide through this life cycle their experiences. And I think why this slide is also important, because it shows that for some activities, patients need, or patient experts need to have some degree or for some higher degree of knowledge on the process and on disease area. And here, I think, I know it's really difficult to measure the value, and I hope that that we just, from my perspective, I understand that regulatory bodies, they need to know the impact, they need the figure. For me, I just hope that we will start to consider it as a given. But I hope it's clear that only patients can bring experience on what does it mean to live with a condition, what does it mean to undergo treatment, to undergo the side effects of the treatment. Just the other week, I was on the call with a company that is developing a drug for very difficult cancers. Pretty much majority of cancers that we serve are really difficult and with poor prognosis. And they were very, very excited to tell me, our new drug, we believe, does not have any major side effects. And I asked, does it induce fatigue? Why? Fatigue is not, from their point of view, fatigue was something, not a major side effect. It doesn't, affects your life. I mean, life as survival. But I said, yeah, but from patient perspective, what we hear from patients is that if they have fatigue due to this drug, their quality of life is really deteriorated. So, and I understand that, from their point of view, this is not something that they would initially first think of, but from patient perspective, this is really important. And I think that's the reason why patients should be engaged with regulators, with industry, and with other bodies. Then I think that only patients can bring experience surrounding their expectations, what do they expect from the treatment, to bring their personal perspective, to offer sometimes different perspective to that of clinicians, of regulators, of industry, and also raise issues that were initially not considered. Therefore, I really think that it's imperative to hear directly from patients. And this is, I have briefly mentioned our experience. So if we talk about our experience for my organization, we work with European medicines agencies. By sometimes a European medicines agency reaches out to us and asks us to provide a patient with a specific condition, specific biomarker for the evaluation process. And just during the coffee break, Julia and I discussed a couple of months ago, we were reached to find a patient, with a specific condition from the EU, English speaking, and this was a problem because we do work with a lot of patients from Europe, but not all patients speak English. And we found a patient, but unfortunately he was not willing to. He is willing to speak in English, but not in front of the clinicians, in front of regulators. And this is something that we have to find a way to overcome. Then a couple of years ago, we had the issue with conflicts of interest, which I agree it's really important, but we had a great and active patient advocate who lived with metastatic colorectal cancer for 7 years, undergoing more than 100 cycles of biologic therapy, which is really not common for colorectal cancer, having in mind that the average survival of metastatic colorectal cancer patient is 3 years. Obviously, he was very active. He spoke at every occasion about what does it mean to live with metastatic colorectal cancer, to undergo treatment. And because he was so active, he traveled to different conferences that were supported by our pharmaceutical industry, and that excluded him from one of the hearings, which I thought was a shame. So I think there needs to be a way to look at it in depth and to understand this better. And then I think, obviously, the deadlines are sometimes problematic because the deadlines could be short, and sometimes it's difficult to find the patient is in a very short period of time. But for me, what is more worrying is non-engagement or non-existence of engagement with local agencies and bodies across some European countries. So we have some really great examples from UK or from the Netherlands where they do have systematical patient engagement all throughout the whole life cycle. But in June, I was in a conference where we discussed the patient engagement with different bodies across Central and Eastern Europe. And pretty much in majority of countries, there is really limited engagement or none. So this is why I think it's really important that we work together and that we learn from good practices and apply them where this is not happening. So I have listed here some barriers for patient engagement, and they align with what Julia presented. So, and also later I have listed, how we can empower patient organizations and patients in order to overcome these barriers. So often it is about the lack of basic knowledge and understanding on the procedures and how to get involved. And if you don't know how to get involved, the chances are that you will not be involved. Then it is the lack of resources that support evidence-based advocacy. Because sometimes it's really helpful if a patient organization can do some survey of their population and then have some data, but not all organizations are able to do this. Due to financial constraints, there is often lack of capacities of patient organizations. Then the question of representativeness that also Julia mentioned, finding the right patient that represent the community. And I think that unfortunately not a lot, for some organizations this is not a problem because they have registries of their membership, but not all. And then there are other barriers like English language, like the materials that are produced, they're often not in lay language, so for patients to understand, this is not always easy, and then the deadlines and the conflicts of interest. And here I have shown a great resource developed by EUPATI, which is a patient-led multi-stakeholder initiative which empowers patients and patient representatives with the right knowledge, skills, and competences to effectively engage with different stakeholders in medicine's research and development. And they do different trainings. So they do individual trainings. They offer they have 27 individual trainings. They have 6 different models, and the most comprehensive is the EUPATI Fellowship program. And currently they are calling all future EUPATI Fellows to register until 1st of November. I have to say that we are really proud to be able to support 4 of our patients to undergo EUPATI Fellowship training that is starting on the 1st of November, because this is a way for us to grow our community. And then here I have listed one resource from the European Medicines Agency, because obviously this is for Europe, for us is the referent agency. And the other resource that I have listed is from WeCan, and WeCan is the work group of European cancer advocacy networks. And this is the network which my organization belongs to. And for their members, they offer the training on the evidence-based advocacy. which means advocating in a targeted, evidence-based, well-educated and professional manner, measuring the impact and the outcomes of the advocacy work, and it is based on 3 core elements. Targeted advocacy towards each representative stakeholder, use of robust data about patients' needs and preferences, and use of the right packaging of messages to communicate the needs to the respective target group. This is also very a good training. And with this, I want to thank you for listening to me today. If you want to reach out, here are my contact details. We would be happy to support you.
Excellent presentation, Zorana, as always. And last, we are going to hear from the United States Food and Drug Administration, and we are going to hear, similar to what the EMA offers, the FDA also offers lots of opportunities for patients to get engaged. Now, I remember when I did this panel years ago that I learned the EMA and FDA communicate on a regular basis, your 2 departments. In fact, I think I remember you had quarterly phone calls so that each department can share over the pond best practices of what you're learning in Europe, what you're learning in the United States, and that's, to me, really amazing that regulators are talking. So we'll talk a little bit about that question answer. Welcome.
Thank you, Andrew. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being at this session. I want to thank the World Patients Alliance for allowing me to be here today and inviting me to this really important conference. And I'm looking forward to your questions, and I hope this information is helpful to you from the US across the pond. Where is here we go. So I always start with this slide. It's pretty colorful and busy, but it's really not to read unless you're really interested in the fine details, but it's really to demonstrate that although some people think patient engagement at FDA has been a recent occurrence, it really has been ongoing for over 30 years. And we can't really pinpoint when exactly it started, but we can indicate formal patient engagement began in the late 1980s during the HIV/AIDS crisis. And at that time, there was a protest outside of the headquarters of FDA because the community and the activists were really upset that FDA was not expediting the review and approval of potential products to help them because their community was dying pretty rapidly. And so from that, FDA realized, there needs to be really an office to engage with patients and caregivers and really interact with them and understand what's important. And that's how it all began. And the office did specifically start with HIV/AIDS as the focus, but then expanded into oncology and then following all serious and life-threatening diseases. So just a little bit about patient affairs. We're dedicated to providing an inviting, welcoming, and meaningful experiences for our patient communities and to engage with FDA. So a lot of the time we hear from patient organizations and individual patients and caregivers, they're so intimidated approaching FDA. Well, we're that friendly face. and after they've interacted with us, they're like, oh, there's real human people behind that door. And so they're really happy to engage with us, and they really start to open up. And that's what we want, because we want to hear those voices. We want to hear those experiences. So I'm going to get into a little bit about patient affairs. But like I said, with HIV/AIDS, it really was the kickoff to really advancing and enhancing patient engagement. And because of that, over the years, if you're not familiar with FDA, we have individual product centers. It's the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, the Center for Biologic Evaluation and Research, and the Center for Devices as well. And each of those centers over the last 10 years created their own engagement offices, because that is really important for each of their centers. They have unique individual issues that they need to understand from patients. So they had to really focus on those topics, and our focus is more cross-cutting. So what we do is we work across the medical product centers. There's a lot of things that come up that affect more than one medical product issue. And so we work across those centers. So we lead patient engagement activities with the medical product centers in cross-cutting programs and activities. And this allows us to listen to patients and caregivers' experiences and perspectives. And we also create public-private partnerships and collaborate with our organizations and patient communities. And our big focus is also educating. And I've heard this before in the previous talks. Education is key. In understanding FDA's role, that's how patients and caregivers can more effectively and efficiently be engaged and get involved in our programs so that we can have that information translated into the impact of our regulatory products that are being reviewed and approved. So I'm going to get into a little bit about all of our programs and initiatives, such as the patient listening sessions, the patient engagement cluster that Andrew alluded to, and then the patient engagement collaborative, and then how we're enhancing communications with our patient communities. So patient listening sessions are a way for FDA to engage quickly with patient communities. And it's really to understand their patient journey and understand their experiences. They're living with a disease and condition 365 days a year. They are experts, and we need to understand what's important to them. And they have a lot of unique experiences to share. But also, these listening sessions can provide an education to our medical product review staff. And they can provide information such as disease and treatment burden, risk tolerance, and quality of life issues. And also, one of the recent things that have been coming up a lot is their participation in clinical trials. What is the hesitancy? What are the barriers? How can we get more patients to participate in clinical trials? They can share information about functionality and impact on daily lives. And most importantly, what is the priority? What is the priority in medical product development? What are they looking for? So that we can develop, or companies can develop, the products that are going to meet their needs as best as possible. Here's a little data on the patient listening session program. The top chart is the number of requested and completed sessions. And we've completed about nearly 60 sessions since the launch of the program in late 2018. And the total number of requests we get is 124. Now, you're probably wondering why there's such a discrepancy there, but we get a lot of requests that sometimes we really need to look into and evaluate because it might not fit the criteria for the program, or it might be specific to a medical product center. Say it's a specific drug issue. Then we would transfer that to the Center for Drugs, and they would have the listening session. And we have to make sure that they're cross-cutting in nature. The other two charts are showing what we've been talking about, value. What's the value in listening to patients and caregivers and hearing those experiences? So after each listening session, we do post-listening session surveys. We send it out to the FDA staff, and we send it out to the patient participants. And we're trying to understand, how to continually improve these sessions and what we can take that information and translate into future sessions. And as you can see here, the FDA staff finds them extremely valuable. And I can tell you one comment that always sticks in my mind with these sessions from an FDA staff, and I think it really sums it up. The information that I found, this is what they said, the information I found in these sessions is not something you can find in a textbook or in a journal article. And it's really helping them to understand what is important to that patient and that patient community. And as you can see also, the patient participants find this very valuable. Another comment that a patient participant had submitted is, I got off the phone and went straight to my husband and said, they actually listened. They heard us. They heard us. She was so excited. Like, you could just feel the excitement through the statement with the exclamation points. So it's really good to see that people are finding these sessions very valuable. So this is what Andrew was talking about, our patient engagement cluster. The European Medicines Agency and the FDA have established a number of clusters over the years. Some of them are around oncology, some of them in pharmacovigilance, some in hematologic products. Most recent ones, rare disease, and of course the patient engagement cluster. And this came out of, in 2015, EMA and FDA had a mutual fellowship exchange where an EMA staff person from Julia's staff came to FDA for 2 weeks, and really we dove into what we did in our patient engagement activities. And then the mutual exchange was occurred at that time in London. I went over there. And so really what we do is meet regularly, and we really share our approaches engaging with patients. We talk about high-profile topics of mutual interest, and we really think about ways we can collaborate to enhance engagement. And in the last few years, Health Canada has joined as observers, and I'm happy to say that this past summer, they formally joined our patient engagement cluster. So now that we have more additional learnings. And at the bottom of the slide, there's a reference that we had published some information about our mutual learnings, if you're interested. Another effort we have is the Patient Engagement Collaborative. And this is one of the things that, from our mutual learnings from the EMA, and we're very excited that we were able to do this. The EMA has been doing it quite longer, but we partner with the Clinical Trials Transformation Initiative, and we established this group modeling after EMA's PCWP, Patients and Consumers Working Party, which Julia had talked about. And from those learnings of their experiences and how they set it up and lessons learned, we were able to set up a similar group of external individual patient and caregivers, as well as patient organization representatives and members. And we discussed topics about enhancing patient engagement in medical product development at FDA. And this group in particular, the inaugural group, had decided they really wanted to focus on communications. So they felt that first and foremost, the patients and caregivers need to understand FDA, what the role is, what our authority is not, and in order to effectively engage. So there has been a lot of communication work around enhancing our 4 patients' web pages off the FDA.gov. And we also developed a sort of a quick fact sheet about what FDA is, what we regulate, what we do, and how they can get involved and get their voices heard. And the link at the bottom is the educational resource that I'm referring to. And so one of the important things is really education and communications, as we've been discussing. As I mentioned, the 4 patients' web pages, we maintain those pages, and we had the help of the Patient Engagement Collaborative to really make them more patient-friendly. We have a web forum called Patients Ask FDA, and this really came out of feedback from the community saying, it is really difficult in understanding how to connect with the agency and how we can get our voices heard. We don't know, it's a very large agency. There's 18,000 employees, there's various centers. So really this forum is really for patients to submit a question or to submit a meeting request. And how it works is if it's automated, so if it's a specific drug issue, for example, it'll go to the Center for Drugs. But if they're not certain, it'll come to us, and we will either, if it's a cross-center issue, we will handle it. Otherwise, we will help them navigate the agency and what is best. And I'll say also, there's a lot of patient organizations that come to me and ask, can I meet with you? I just don't understand, I'm trying to do X, Y, Z, and I don't understand where I need to go or what I need to do. And they find it very useful, so we just have conversations. And again, it also helps with that intimidation factor. People really feel intimidated approaching the agency, and we're just trying to be that friendly face so they know that they're welcome and we want to hear from them. We also keep communicating social media. It's really important. Patient organizations and patients are on Twitter. They're on Facebook. So we have our own Twitter handle, and we send out information regularly. FDA has a Facebook account, and we submit that information through our FDA web account. We also have a Patients Matter video series, and this was developed again around that education component and helping them better understand FDA's role and how they can get involved. And the Patient Network News is a subscription newsletter that can be self-subscribed, and they can get information on communication updates, safety announcements, things like that. That's really important. But we also send targeted emails through our 1,600 list of stakeholders to targeted communities. Maybe there's a specific issue with a product for a specific disease area, and we will send those targeted emails out so people are informed. And finally, this is the team. This is the friendly faces to FDA. So again, we're always here and happy to help in any way we can. So please reach out to us if you have any questions, if you're trying to understand FDA or understand how to get to what you want to do at FDA and interact with FDA, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Great presentations on how patients can engage with regulators. I have a panel, a question from the online audience first, from our friend Ermi. And the question goes to Julia. Do you work together with UPADI or use their material on training patients to contribute to EMA?
Thank you very much. So we have been involved in the creation of UPATI, and we have been, of course, consulted on the material that UPATI teaches. We have also benefited from the contribution of patients who have gone through the UPATI course, but we are not directly involved in the runnings of UPATI and so on and so forth. I mean, we're not a part of their organization.
Great, great. So a couple minutes left. Questions from the audience? Just raise your hand, and while we're getting the microphone to you, I have a question for the panel. I'm really excited to see that the partnership has expanded and Health Canada is now involved. My question is, how can we get all regulators involved? So those that don't live in a high-income country like the US or the EU or Canada, and some of the people that live in lower and middle-income countries, how can they engage with their regulators? Do you know, and it's a long question, do you know if those regulators also have similar programs? Do you know if the WHO is working on codifying all of the great work you're doing so that all regulators can engage patients just as effectively? So, you want to take that one first?
Yes, thank you. Maybe Andrea can answer as well, but it's really a lot about exchange. I think not me personally, but my team has been involved in exchanges with, for example, countries in Latin America, discussing what our solutions have been, what our process has been, how we have come to these solutions, because for us, when it started, it was a process of trial and error. A lot of the things that are now normal standard practice have come out of an exploratory process of trial and error. So communicating what we have established helps, I think, provide solutions that are already tried and tested. There's also a big role of patient organizations, because as we have seen from Zorana and from Andrea's presentations, a lot of the work that was done to get the conversation going about patient engagements with FDA, with EMA, was done by organizations like the HIV organizations, like Eurodis, for example, was an incredibly important organization in setting up some of the processes that we now have for rare diseases in place at EMA. And so there is definitely a big role for the advocacy of patient organizations. So keep doing the good work, I would say.
Andrea?
Yeah, I echo everything that Julia has just mentioned, and I must say it is about exchange, and I know that it's something that we really need to further explore. This is a good start with EMA and then Health Canada. I'm hearing some talks about Japan having interest in the patient engagement cluster. So it's expanding and expanding. And I will say it's about modeling. You mentioned that. It's what we learned from EMA and we were able to apply at FDA, and how we can interact with the other regulators and share our knowledge and learnings and hear from them and learn from them as well. I will say also, just even in the rare disease community, we have a lot of organizations that are just starting out. They might not even have a name of their disease. It's a number or letters, or a combination of that. And they're an online community and they're trying to grow. I oftentimes will connect them with organizations, other rare disease organizations that might have been at that point or were at that point, and how they've advanced through the years and enhanced and really have come such a long way and helped advance the science just from all their activities and interactions and even engaging with the agency at FDA. And they will share their knowledge and experience, and it's similar. It's just similar, just applying that and transferring that to the regulatory agencies as well.
So all the drug regulators meet every 2 years, right, at the ICDRA conference?
Yes.
When is the next one, and how can we get a panel on this, a presentation, so that all of the regulators can learn what these three great bodies are doing?
I'm not involved in that one, but I can find out and get back to you.
That would be great. I mean, I think that's what we have to do, is we have to have a panel in front of all the drug regulators around the world so they can all see what FDA, EMA, and Health Canada are doing so that they can all implement these and get the patient voice involved in all of these policy discussions. Any questions from the audience? I know we're out of time, but it's so rare we get this quality of panelists together to talk to the patient. So I know we're out of time, but does anybody have any questions, or do you all just want to run to lunch?
No question, but I want to just comment that I was amazed to listen to both of the girls that the EMA and FDA are regularly interacting with you. We can't think of such things in India. Even though I have personal contacts with the chief officer of the DCGI, which is the Drug Control Authority of India, but we can never think of talking to them and interacting like this for the patient benefits. So I'd like to learn from you and even personally contact. Maybe we are planning to have a meeting, and we'll see how you can help us.
Yeah, how many times have we all said, God, if these governments could only talk to each other and work together? And it's been happening for years and years and years in this department, which is the department we care the most about. But boy, imagine if governments could work together in all departments, it would be amazing. So, okay, you all want to go to lunch. You have 1 hour for lunch, and then we come back here at 2 o'clock for a great 1 hour and 20-minute session on digital health, the new health for everybody. So we welcome everybody back in 1 hour. As yesterday, go straight up the steps and go straight across to the lunchroom, to the restaurant. We have the whole restaurant again, so plenty of food for everybody. Don't make any turns, just go straight across when you go up the steps, and we'll see you back here in 1 hour. Thank you to our great panelists for another great session.